Do you want Detroit sports talk done right? Yeah! If you want it, you got it. It's Detroit sports talk with attitude. It's the Knee Jerks with Eno and Big Al.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like at this time to introduce to you one of the finest running backs in the United States of America, and our number one pick, Barry Sanders.
Here's Isaiah. Let's see what we got. All the way up. Go!
We might not be in your car or on your transistor radio, but we're bringing you the best of Detroit sports past, present, and future. It's time for the Knee Jerks with two guys who know Detroit sports. Here's Greg Eno and Al Beaton.
It's April 20th, 2021, 420 as the hip kids like to say, and that means it's also time for the Knee Jerks, Detroit Sports Talk with Eno and Big Al. I'm the Big Al of the equation, Al Beaton, longtime Detroit-based podcaster and blogger. I may not have any doobage on me, but I do have with me the man who knows a lot of things about a lot of things. I don't think he's got doobage either. He's more likely to have a scotch, and that would be Greg Eno. Greg, what's up?
The doobage days are long gone. But not the Scotch days. You're right.
Yeah.
The Scotch days are still alive and well. I am doing well. Thanks, Al Beaton. I am Greg Eno from my WordPress Out of Bounds blog. You can catch that just about every week, something new. My most recent column was about the Tigers' 10-game roller coaster road trip and how that kind of, in my mind, is a microcosm of their team this year. You can catch that. And also follow me on Twitter at Greg Eno, and follow the Knee Jerks on Twitter at the Knee Jerks. Lots to talk about with the Tigers. And we're going to hit the Pistons and the Red Wings tonight. Not so much the Lions. Kind of quiet on the Lions front. So
yeah, kind of treading water till the draft right now with them.
Yeah, trying to leave them alone. I will say that I'm trying to, Al, get new EMU basketball coach Stan Heath on our program. Yes. I've reached out to the university, and we're going to try to get Coach Heath on here and talk about coming home to Eastern where he played. And Coach Heath has been all over the place, Arkansas, Kent State, or maybe it was Bowling Green, one of the two, one of the other MAC schools where I think it was Kent State, where he's had a lot of success. He did okay in Arkansas, and now he's back home with at Eastern, where he went to college and played under Ben Braun. So we'll talk about that if we get him on the show. Yeah,
and if I remember right, I believe he played high school ball at Milan because at that point, Milan was still playing my old high school. Airport back in the, we're talking, I think he played at Milan in the early 80s. I was already out of school at that point. So I wouldn't have played against him, but as soon as I saw the name, I remember him from high school of all things, because he was a big time local high school ball player that stayed local, and I recognize, and he's had a relatively successful coaching career. And I hope things work out for him at Eastern, because didn't Eastern's head coach actually leave to take the GM job with the new G League team in Detroit, right?
Right. Yeah. Rob. Got us. What kind of an alumni am I that I don't remember his last name? Murphy took the job. Murphy was there for about 10 years, I think. Murphy was there.
Yeah. I was surprised he'd been around that long because hopefully there'll be a bit of a resurgence in Eastern basketball. When is the last time they really made any noise, like in the NCAA tournament or something?
Yeah, it's been a while.
Yeah.
Since got the Ben Braun.
That's the era of everything. Ben Braun, yeah,
mid-90s. I was really sad to see Ben.
Yeah, because didn't they have a big upset win in the tournament one year?
Yeah, they beat Duke.
Yeah, didn't they make it to the Sweet 16?
They made it to the Sweet 16 in 91. Yeah, they lost to North Carolina.
Yeah.
They beat Duke in 96 in the first round, although that was a weak Duke team. But
still, I remember watching one of those games in a bar, if I remember right. And I think it was the God, that's how long ago it was, God, we're talking 30 years at this point. It's about time Eastern makes noise again. At least in hoops. Yeah. Yep. Exactly. Right. Well, they're making some progress on the gridiron. Oh, yes, they are. They definitely are. It's
I think three bowl games in the last 5 years or whatever it is. Well, so it's getting there.
Considering what that school used to be like decades ago when they were this close to being booted from the MAC. I mean, they were literally that close.
I was in school when that happened.
Yeah.
Let's talk about what we're going to. Before we get to any of what we're going to talk about, let's play a game we like to call Whose Birthday Is It, Maestro?
We baked you a birthday cake if you get it to me, and you moan and groan and woe, don't forget we told you so. Happy birthday! Happy birthday!
Everybody knows how we play this game by now. I'll give Al a clue or two or three of an individual whose birthday it is today in the world of sports. If Al can correctly guess that person within the first two clues, he'll win a Hamilton Beach Joe Namath endorsed popcorn popper. With the water dripping down the top.
Is it an air popper or when you put a little oil on it, it's got the little rotating metal bar? And then you turn it over and the lid is actually the bowl.
Oh God, Namath! He did that. He did did he do the nylon commercials for female for ladies nylons?
Yeah, was it for legs? The ones that came in the eggs or something like that? I don't even remember. But yeah, or it might have been Maidenform. I have no idea. But yeah, I remember he did the ad with the nylons and said. I forgot. I remember. I used to remember what the tagline was. But anyway, but you're right. There are some athletes who will essentially. If there's any money involved, they will promote it.
Shaquille O'Neal will do a commercial for it.
Yeah, he'll do one for that for the general and all.
General insurance.
Yeah,
every day.
Anyway,
this person, Al, made his name in the world of football. He was born today in 1945. He's still with us, so he's 76 years old today. Pretty good football player, actually. Ended up. It was a good football player in college. Didn't necessarily transfer. That success to the pros, although he carved out about a 10-year career in the pros, but always kind of in the background. I will say he played on the offensive side of the ball. I will tell you that he made way more news as a head coach in both college and pro. And I will tell you that he was a first-round draft pick, third overall, in the 1967 NFL draft.
Oh. And he actually made his hay more as a coach. Obviously, then played all through the 70s for the most part, or close to all the 70s. Oh, God. But yeah, I had a couple of names rolling around, but then when you threw in the third overall pick of the 1967, you said the NFL draft, not the AFL draft, right? Yeah, NFL draft.
Yep.
Huh. And that kind of goes, that changes things a bit. Oh, more than a bit. I'm gonna turn down the as they used to say on What's My Line? I'll turn down the $20 card and wait for the $50 card. So I'm going to pass. So
okay.
All right. But so I will have to dig into the bowels of my mind, as scary as that sounds, to see if I can come up with this one. So
yeah.
Anyway, now we got with that. Let's. I see we got Tigers, Pistons, Red Wings. Shall we start with the Red Wings, Greg? Because they did make the biggest move, most news, I guess I should say, since we've been off, and that would be because of the blockbuster trade. So we start with some Wings.
Perhaps go ahead.
All right, and for the last couple years, Greg, we've been saying how the Red Wings have essentially been a one-line team. Didn't last very long this year because, one, Bertuzzi got hurt, and he's been awful. It doesn't look like he's going to even make it back this year. They keep saying upper body injury. If you're out this long, it's probably something matter of your back, a back injury of some sort. Regardless of that, that line got broke up. So Larkin and Mantha have been bouncing around the top two lines, and the low line blender, as they like to say, what Jeff Blashill does. And for the last few, actually, I think for the entirety of Anthony Mantha's career, Greg, he's always been considered an underachiever, or he's maybe they've said that he tends to float, or he tends to take games off. He shows flashes of being that elite Brendan Shanahan-style power forward, but he either gets injured or he just disappears, and for that matter, he's been playing on an absolutely awful hockey team for the last few years. So, with that out of the way, the Wings finally traded Mantha in a blockbuster deal. It probably was the biggest trade of the trade deadline in the NHL. He went to the Washington Capitals, in for quite a haul, but as we'll talk about the trade, it's kind of like two trades packaged together as one. But Mantha went to the Capitals for a first-round pick in 2021, a second-round pick in 2022, and forwards Jakub Vrana and Richard Panik. Vrana's 25. Much like Mantha, he's a first-round pick. I believe he's a year younger at 25. He's had 11 goals, 11 and 14 assists in 39 games this year. I think he's had point totals going up a couple since the trade. I think he's got a couple of assists with the Red Wings. But he's a pending restricted free agent coming off a 2-year, $6.7 million deal. And the thing with Vrana, Greg, is that he pretty much has had the same exact reputation as Anthony Mantha, in that he puts up good numbers, but he's thought to be an underachiever, especially in the playoffs. The Washington Capitals fans were more than happy to see him go because they thought he disappeared in the playoffs. And there's a lot of talk that he tends to float. He's been considered a bit of an underachiever, and a very similar rep to Anthony Mantha. Along with that, with Panik, fourth line guy who I think his main value was that the Wings can actually expose him in the upcoming expansion draft with Seattle entering the league, and that means now he is eligible to be exposed. Now they can protect a younger player such as Vladimir Nemenstikov or Evgeny Svechnikov. And also, you could actually say in a lot of ways this was kind of a two trades in one, in that the Red Wings essentially got a first-round pick for Mantha, and then they were giving a second-round pick to take the contract of Panik off the hands of Washington, allow them to clear space for Mantha and get them out of a little bit of cap hell that they might be coming up on. So I guess this is one of those things that when it comes to, well, we've seen it from a lot of GMs in this town, Greg, that they don't they tend to hold on to players too long. And I remember on the last podcast, I actually said if the Wings trade Mantha, don't you think that would be the Wings trading him at very low value, and I wouldn't be expecting much in return? And then Steve Yzerman sure showed me by getting a first-round pick and a second-round pick in return, even though they did have to take a contract along with it. And they got a guy they're likely planning on signing for the next 2 or 3 years, and he's going to be he's a top two-line kind of guy. So I think it was a bit of kind of an overpay for Washington, but Mantha, I think, as many people expected, he's strapped a rocket to his back, and he's taken off because he scored a goal in 4 consecutive games for them. Every game he's played in, he scored a goal. But I guess that shouldn't be surprising, considering I believe he's playing on the top line there, getting a ton of minutes, and he's playing on a team that is desperate to win one more Stanley Cup before they have to start breaking things up because of salaries. So I was actually surprised by the trade. I was surprised by what the Wings got, but I'm not surprised that Mantha's playing well in Washington. But again, small sample size, and we'll wait and see how it goes. So where do you fall on the Wings trading Mantha?
Well, the first thing I thought of when I read about the trade was that this is not a trade that Kenny Holland would have made. No way would he have cut bait on a guy like Mantha that soon into his Red Wings career. You mentioned at the top of your comments that GMs tend to hold on to players too long. On the other hand, I can see why a guy like Mantha, though, would be appealing to a team like Washington.
Yeah.
This is kind of what we were talking about a while ago when we were comparing why it seemed like the Brooklyn Nets would want to sign Blake Griffin for the rest of the year.
Yeah.
The Capitals, obviously, they won a cup. I get it. But they're still a very good hockey team, and they still have Ovechkin. They still have a lot of talented guys, and there's no reason why they can't win another Stanley Cup. Mm-hmm. So I can see why a guy like Mantha, who does have a lot of potential and is a big body and can do a lot of things when he's on, is appealing. And I can also see why the Red Wings would want to get rid of him, because he's been at times he's floating around there and being invisible on some nights and so forth. So
right.
for the haul that Yzerman got back, and I think he made a good point about Panik's contract and so forth, but for the haul that Yzerman got back, mm-hmm. I consider it a very good trade for the Red Wings. I know that some fans might be a little disappointed or a little bit even kind of taken aback by the trade,
right.
But because Mantha was considered to be one of the building blocks that the team would be built around going forward. But
mm-hmm.
Yzerman, I think, just felt like he just, even after he signed Mantha to that extension last summer, just didn't see what he wanted to see. And of course, he's very classy about it. Never really went there. The media tried to get him to go there. Was this about his effort? Was this about, him being a disappointment and so forth? And Yzerman didn't take the bait. I don't think he needed to. I think it's just kind of out there. I don't think at this point there's anything that he could say that would even people who understand this hockey team and follow it already know kind of what's going on with that. So I think, with the picks that they got back and the players they got back, and to me it makes sense for Washington as well. They're in the buyer mode still. And I consider this a buyer's trade for them. And I think it's one of those trades that's good for both clubs. Mantha, okay, he's hot, okay, whatever. Small sample size, like you said. And if Mantha goes on and ends up reaches his potential and it becomes the player that we all think he can be, that's fine. I don't think that I will not then go 20/20 hindsight and say, oh, the Red Wings shouldn't have traded him. I think at this point in time, I think it makes sense, because just based on what we've seen so far of him, he hasn't done enough to make you feel like that he's tapped his potential. So why not try to get something back for him? And Yzerman got quite a bit back for him, actually.
Yeah. That's the kind of the chicken or the egg kind of thing. Would he reach his potential in Detroit? Or is it because Detroit couldn't do it, or because Mantha, or is it Mantha not reaching his potential because he's You know what I mean? So
like remember Keith Primo?
We hear the same arguments about him back in the day.
Well, he's this big guy that doesn't really. Why is it? For some reason, if you're big in hockey, physically big, that you're supposed to do all these great things. Yeah. Keith Primo was a guy who never quite got there. Now, in his defense, there were a lot of great players around him, and he kind of got overshadowed and so forth. And you mentioned Mantha going to Washington, playing with better players. Yeah. But Primo ended up becoming a pretty good player when he left Detroit. Didn't he end up in Philadelphia or Carolina, Philadelphia? Yeah. He was a pretty good player. Yeah. I think they traded him as part of the Shanahan trade, if I'm not mistaken.
I think you're right. I was trying to think of who he was. I think it was the Shanahan trade.
Yeah, and then he went on, like I say, played a number of years with Carolina, played some time, like you said, in Philadelphia. And by the time it was all said and done, Primo had carved out a pretty nice career. Yeah. Now, I wasn't probably to the extent that he maybe that was commensurate with where he was drafted, but still, I'm just using him as an example.
But you're saying this is a trade of an NHL player for an NHL player and looking for a better fit. And it's and obviously Vrana is a completely different type of player. He's smaller, faster, shiftier. While obviously Mantha is your prototypical anyway power forward. Even though we didn't always get to see it, or when he did try to be a power forward, he ended up breaking his hand on someone's helmet. So I think that also kind of played into it. Is that Mantha had some bad luck here. He had some injuries that wasn't all. Well, you could see partially his fault because he had a couple of injuries from fighting, but that's what they were asking him to do, and obviously, the timing kind of didn't work out with the Wings, and speaking of timing, I think that's also worked out in this trade is that Yzerman has already figured out the timeline for this team where he expects them to compete again, and I don't think by the time this team is going to be a threat for anything, Mantha will probably be into his 30s. And he's already, he's 26 right now, which kind of says volumes about the team Yzerman inherited and where he thinks he stands right now. So we got a younger player in return, got some extra draft capital. They got a ton of draft capital now. And also they got a contract that they can kind of play with now with the upcoming expansion draft. So I think a lot of people thought that, this was more, they were calling it Steve Yzerman tends to pull these trades out of his hat. I mean, there's another word I could use, but I'll stay clean. But I did not see. Plus, the other thing, this trade happened right at the deadline. It actually got announced after the deadline. It was like 15 to 30 minutes after the end of the deadline before it got released. everybody thought, well, that was it, because Yzerman did make some trades, but they were all really minor, getting, trading depth defensemen for 4th and 5th round picks. So this was, I think this trade kind of really gives you an idea where this team stands in the rebuild, and they still got a long way to go. A long way to go.
Well, they struggle to score.
Oh, God,
they've been struggling to score forever, it seems like. I mean, it's amazing how hard it is for them to score goals. Mm-hmm. But, it's 2 years now into Yzerman's literally almost and I know COVID is in there. It's been a weird 2 years, and that's not long enough. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to insinuate that that he's underachieving or anything. Right. But it's to the point now where we kind of he's putting more and more of his stamp on the team. We'll talk about the coaching situation, I'm sure, in a second. Right. But the team still is. You mentioned it before we went on the air that you look at the roster and where is it happening? But there are still some young players that are coming through that either are not with the Red Wings yet, or are just starting to get their feet wet with the Red Wings. I'm still confident that he meaning Yzerman, can do this, can bring them through, bring the team through this, and come out on the other side and with some frequent playoff appearances and so forth. Mainly because, and not just because he's who he is, but because he's done it before with Tampa Bay. When he went to Tampa, they were among the worst teams in hockey. Right. I remember saying at the time when he was rumored to be up for that job, and I said, he should take it. I said the job's beneath him, frankly. Mm-hmm. I said, but he should take it because he needs to be a GM. He wasn't going anywhere in Detroit with Holland and Jimmy Nill and everybody blocking him. I said he needs to go somewhere, and if this is where it has to be, the dregs of the league essentially with Tampa, then so be it. And he exceeded even my expectations. He got that club, Tampa, competitive within a couple of years, right? And not that means that you're going to do it everywhere you go. You'll be that successful, but he has done it. Yeah. So it wasn't like he was a guy that stepped into a board with a silver spoon in his mouth when it comes to being a GM. He had to really work for it in Tampa, taking a lousy job and building that club into consistently. Mm-hmm. Over the last 7-8 years, consistently one of the better teams in the NHL. Yeah, and it's been mainly because of his drafting and his trades and the coaches that he's hired. He left a very good situation to whoever succeeded him because he got that organization shipshape. Right.
Yeah, I did find it interesting that the rumor was, at least that was being reported by a couple of the NHL insiders, is that the Wings were open for business and willing to talk trade about anybody in their organization except for 3 players. Seider, Raymond, Mo Seider and Lucas Raymond are top two prospects. Yeah. And Dylan Larkin, which I thought was interesting. Yeah. They said those 3 players were off the table. Everybody else he was willing to talk about, which I found kind of interesting, which also says volumes about the roster as well. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I might throw Bertuzzi in there if it was me, but he wasn't going to get traded anyway because he's been hurt all year. Yeah. But, it's been, again, it just kind of shows just how weak this roster is. And I guess we should also mention, I had mentioned earlier, there were a handful of other trades, and they were minor, but there was one that kind of stuck out because it was so complicated, and the Wings actually didn't end up trading anybody, but ended up with a draft pick. And that a couple of minor trades is they traded defenseman John Merrill, who they picked up as a free agent. He went to the Canadiens for a 5th-round pick, and they also picked up in that trade the little ball hates, I believe, his nephew, Hayden Verbeek, Pat Verbeek's nephew, Patrick Nemeth, another Nemeth, I believe, the defenseman. He went to the Avalanche for a 4th-round pick. These were second, third pair defensemen that were being shipped off. And I think what was really interesting was the other trade, which kind of shows how Yzerman is able to finagle things, about how he was a middleman in a trade where the Wings essentially worked out as the middleman. They made the deal happen. they were the fixer, so to speak, in a trade between the Blue Jackets and the Lightning. And ultimately, to make a trade happen, I believe Tampa needed to unload some salary. And as the trade went down, I believe the Blue Jackets kept 50% of the salary, and the Wings did a little maneuvering, ended up taking on $250K in salary, $250,000, and then they just forwarded that same player on to the Lightning, and in exchange, they got a 4th-round pick. And I believe to make the deal happen, there was a player in Grand Rapids that had to be added to the deal, but he never left Grand Rapids because he was then immediately loaned back to the Griffins. So essentially, Yzerman didn't trade he didn't lose anybody in the organization. Well, he lost the rights to a guy, but he was like he's a 30-year-old forward that plays with the Griffins. He's not a prospect. And for the trouble, he gained a draft pick, which I found was fascinating. And I had to read this trade over a few times, go, what exactly happened here? But he made it, it was like, that just goes to show how valuable cap space is, because it allows you to do little things like this and get more draft capital. And now he's got a crazy amount of draft assets. I think he's got like 22 picks in the next 2 drafts, something crazy like that.
And that's great. Mm-hmm. But
yeah,
those picks, it's wonderful. Draft capital is great, but those picks are
lottery tickets.
Any of those, well, no, yeah, but I mean, if any of those guys, by the time those guys get anywhere near the NHL, another 3 or 4 years will have gone by.
Yeah.
So the rebuild didn't start with Steve Yzerman arriving here. It really didn't. Mm-hmm. It started a couple of years before that, begrudgingly. Yeah. It started, and now the fans. Yes, they were, hardened by Yzerman being hired, but now that's worn off. Now It's back to okay. They don't look at the fans' calendar doesn't start at 2019. Mm-hmm. It starts earlier than that.
Yeah.
The Yzerman's regime is 2 years old, yes, but this rebuild that they've been, when I say they, the fans have been suffering through, is a lot older than that. Mm-hmm. And they're getting, it's becoming, this town is just fatigued, Al, with rebuilds. It's rebuild fatigue. You want to look everywhere for some sort of sign of somebody getting out of this rebuild nightmare. And there's just been nothing but rebuilds for the last 5 years all over town. And I understand that. I understand how frustrating that can be. I mean, you and I have experienced lots of championships in our times with Detroit teams. We've had our time. Yeah. These younger fans who are too young to remember some of those championships that you and I remember, have known nothing, are frustrated with rebuild after rebuild after rebuild. And excuse me. So I love the draft capital. I love what he's doing, and I understand why he's doing it. But there is still that frustration factor that, come on, guys, it's been 4 or 5 years now, and we haven't really seen, Little Caesars Arena has been open for 3 or 4 years now, no playoff games yet. Yeah. It's very unusual to open up a brand new arena and wait 5 or 6 years before you get a playoff game. Yeah. And that's exactly what, and now they did it with Joe Louis, because they opened it up in 79, didn't get a playoff game until 84, but that was a different situation. They had come out of a horrible decade. Mm-hmm. And so, I understand totally what he's doing. All I'm saying is that I just don't know how much longer the fans how much more leeway they're going to give him, fair or not, before they start to turn on him now. Yeah. And say, where's the beef? Where's the substance? Where's the improvement? Where's the better? Where are we improved? Where? Tell me why I should be, positive about this hockey team. And this might be a segue into the coaching situation. Yeah, and it also kind of brings to mind that I think we're at that point with the Tigers, with Al Avila and the Tigers. Essentially, where's the beef? It's been 5 years now. Right. Where's the sign we're improving? And then you got like Troy Weaver and with the Pistons, who's he's still in the honeymoon phase, and so far the honeymoon's worked out great because he had such a gangbusters first draft. And then you got Yzerman, who's still kind of in the honeymoon phase,
But I think now the reality is starting to hit the fan base in the face as they're being slapped in the face of how they're seeing what Yzerman sees, and they're seeing a team that is still a long ways away from being a true cup competitor, let alone a playoff team. And because like you said, he turned around Tampa fairly quickly, but Tampa wasn't as bad either. They had. Tampa had some building blocks there at the time. Better, Stamkos being the big one. Yeah, the Wings had a couple of building blocks here, but their building block is essentially Dylan Larkin, who realistically is a second-line center. The building blocks the true building blocks are still in the minors. That's Seider and Raymond, maybe a couple other guys like Vrana.
Right.
So that's but I think you're onto something there, where fans are starting to get the sudden realization that Yzerman's making some good moves, but they maybe end up doing a little more deconstruction before the construction truly starts. And I think we saw that with the trade of Anthony Mantha.
You talked about, you mentioned Larkin supposedly being on that list of the 3 untouchables.
Right.
And, I wonder if that is more on prestige than it is performance, because,
that he's the face of the franchise, and he's a homegrown kid who played at Michigan, and they ended up playing at the Red Wings. Yeah, it's more of a PR thing than anything else, like you're saying.
Yeah, and it made sense that he was the captain. There really wasn't anybody else,
right?
And I know that doesn't. I have written a column about the fact that when Yzerman made that selection of Larkin as captain, that it wasn't simply a matter of process of elimination, but the fact of the matter is, you just said it a couple of seconds ago, you take Dylan Larkin off the Red Wings and you put him anywhere else in the NHL, most anywhere else.
Yeah.
And on most teams, he's not the number one guy, right? Number one center. He's not. Mm-hmm. You look at his numbers. He had 32 goals in 2019. Slumped down to 19 the following year. So you look at the numbers, 19 goals in 71 games after the 32-goal season. Then 8. Yeah. And 43 games this year. Mm-hmm. Sometimes, faces of the franchise, when the franchise isn't very good, the faces aren't very good. Okay.
Yeah, kind of like the Tigers All-Stars during the 90s.
That's a good one.
Rob Fick, All-Star, yeah.
That should be a Jeopardy category.
Yeah.
The thing about Larkin, though, is I don't know what he's supposed to be. I don't know if he's supposed to be a big scorer, if he's supposed to be a playmaker. Is he supposed to be a 20-goal-a-year guy? Is he supposed to be a 30-goal-a-year guy? Because he's done that. He scored 30. Yeah. Or what is he? I don't know what he is yet. And part of that is because he's playing in these turbulent times where the team is turbulent. So you don't even know what the team is. And you don't really know what he is yet. But you're right. You made a good point about him being a second line center in most cities. Maybe. So, but yes, it still made sense that he'd become the captain. It still made sense that he's face the franchise because of, like you said, the local ties,
the intangibles.
Right. And those are valid points. But all I'm saying is, just from a strictly, numbers standpoint, I don't know what he is. I don't know what he is. I don't know what his ceiling is. I don't know if he's just going to be kind of a 15 to 20 goal a year guy. Yeah. I don't know if he's supposed to score 30 goals.
Yeah, because the 30 goal year is kind of looking like an outlier at this point.
Yeah, right. I'm getting some I'm a little bit of Justin Abdelkader vibes here. Yeah. Only because I hope he doesn't go to sink that. Yeah. I just wonder. I don't know what he is. I don't know what to expect from him. Right. And he's kind of gotten a pass, Larkin has, for a couple of reasons. Number one is he's one of the longest tenured maybe the longest tenured Red Wing by this point. And secondly, he's the captain. And Yzerman made him the captain. So he gets, you mentioned honeymoon. Yeah. He gets honeymoon for that. But sooner or later, you're going to open a Hockey Reference and bring up Larkin and say, gee whiz, where's the production? I mean, it's great to be a captain. It's wonderful to be captain. But we're used to, in Detroit, the captain being one of the better players in the league, let alone in the Red Wings. Right. So, this is a different kind of scenario. I understand it. But so I'm still not willing to write him off by any stretch.
Oh yeah, definitely.
I just don't know what he is. I don't know what I just don't know what it is.
Yeah.
With him. So we'll see. Maybe when the team gets better, maybe his numbers will improve. Maybe some of the numbers may be just a byproduct of the team being lousy. I don't know.
Right.
But he did score 32 goals as recently as 2019. He scored 73 points, almost a point a game 2 years ago, for a bad team. So I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, it's really it's his struggles are just a sign of a whole franchise that's in flux right now, especially roster-wise. Right. As with all these trades that have been made, and right now they're throwing out for the most part, a glorified AHL team out there. Especially when you're talking to deaf guys. So I mean, come on, when you're running Giovanni Smith and his ilk out there, you're talking guys who might be 4A players at best.
Right.
All right, and you brought up the coaching rumor, and that's worth bringing up before we move on to a different topic, and that would be at the trade deadline. As and to Yzerman's credit, he's fairly available with the media, so he's not a Bob Quinn type. He's not Alavita either, who will actually show you his cards and say, "This is what I'm going to do." Yzerman's a little more close to the vest, but he's willing to speak to the media relatively often. And he was asked about Jeff Blashill's status as head coach, because it's obviously the elephant in the room is he's a lame duck right now. He's in the last year of his contract, has not had an extension. Yzerman at the time said, Jeff and I will sit down very quickly after the season and discuss that, and that's pretty much where we cut it off. Well, this week, Joe Micheletti of NBC Sports, I believe he did it during their national broadcast on NBCSN, he reported that Steve Yzerman and Jeff Blashill are having good conversations about a new contract. So that's the kind of leak, Greg, that comes out. If Blashill was not being under consideration to come back, if they weren't talking contract, if there wasn't something going on in behind the scenes, I don't think this gets leaked, because this is a leak. Someone in the organization is throwing out that trial balloon, kind of say, okay, well, how will the public take this? How will the media take this? And that really comes off as Steve Yzerman throwing out, maybe Yzerman himself is the unnamed source here, and he's throwing out there, we're talking to Blashill, we may have him back next year. We're having, things are, essentially they're saying we are not unhappy with him, and Yzerman is on record saying he does not blame the Wings' struggles on him. He blames the Wings' struggles on having a crappy roster. So I can understand Yzerman being fine bringing Blashill back. Plus, I think there's one other factor here. Blashill is one of the lowest paid coaches in the league. And when you're at an organization that really has had butts in the seats it'll be essentially about a year and a half, about a season and a half, way it's going to end up being, where they're going to have nowhere near to a close full house. A coach that isn't going to break the bank is probably pretty darn appealing to the Illich organization. So I think there's a few things at work here. One, I think Yzerman realizes Blashill's been given a shit hand, and he also realizes that there's only so many of these jobs to go around, and to keep Blashill, he'd probably only have to give him a nominal raise. And it probably wouldn't have to be that long of a deal either. Maybe 3 years, maybe 2, something like that. I don't think Blashill is working from he's not in a position of strength. So he's more or less going to, if he wants to stay in the NHL as a head coach, he's probably going to say, the Wings will say, here's our offer, take it or leave it. And the odds are Blashill would take it. And knowing that the rebuild's still going to take who knows how long, could be another half decade. We can still roll with Blashill as the developmental bridge coach till they actually decide it's time to find the guy. So, but yeah, I would not surprise me. I wouldn't bother me if they moved on from Blashill, because I do not always agree about how he's handled his team. But I could also understand the Wings' reasoning if they decided to keep him as well.
Yes, this is one of those decisions that if you don't care, you mentioned trial balloon a few minutes ago. Yeah. If you don't care what the fans think. And I understand you don't make decisions based on that. I get it.
Right.
But there are some decisions where that does come into play.
Yeah.
We're not in normal times right now. We're not in times where you're trying to bring 18,000 people to the arena on a nightly basis. I understand that. We're not there yet. So you're right. There is a financial component to this. But if you don't care at all about how the fans are going to take this, then you might consider bringing Blashill back. But if you care one iota of how the fans are going to take it, you don't do it because it's not going to be received well. I don't care. You can justify it all you want with money. I don't know how they would justify it publicly. Right. You mentioned some good points about money and about the rebuild still a couple years away and whatever. I can guarantee you the fans will not be happy.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
That's without question.
They are. I think they have reached Blashill exhaustion.
Blashill fatigue, and I think that's justified, frankly. Yeah. I mean, if you look at you can say all you want about, he's been dealt a bad hand. The thing that I think gets people annoyed with Jeff Blashill is a couple of things. Number one, the fans don't see any sort of real improvement with some of the players that have been around for a while. The younger guys, there are too many times where the team doesn't show up. That's another red flag.
Yeah, that's a good point.
You can say whatever you want about. Well, he's dealt a bad hand, and these guys aren't.
There's been a lot of those 7-1, 6-2 losses where they've been out of it in the first quarter, in the first period. Yeah. And
the thing too, Al, and this is only something that you and I can't decide this because we're not close enough to the situation. But does there become a time where the team just needs a new voice? They just need a new voice. Now, I don't see a lot of players come out, and I could be, unless I'm just not seeing it, I don't see a lot of support for Blashill. I don't see a lot of guys going out of their way to be quoted, and I'm talking about the guys like Luke Glendening who've been around the block, and the younger guys too. And by the way, I misspoke when I said that Dylan Larkin was the longest tenured Red Wing. Obviously, it's Glendening, but so I mean, I'm not seeing a lot of. He's in the last year of his contract, which is when you would talk about this kind of thing. I haven't seen a lot of guys, campaigning, if you will, for Blashill. Now, maybe that doesn't mean anything. Maybe they campaign for behind the scenes. Maybe they just don't do it publicly. But nor have I seen anybody publicly say anything bad about him either, as far as that goes. But I just haven't seen a lot of groundswell of support to bring him back. Now, I just wonder if, taking the fans out of the equation, if it's just time for the players to just have a different voice, a different guy. Now, everybody on that coaching staff, I think, is in the last year of their contract. So it would be potentially a complete house cleaning if Yzerman went that route. Because not only would Blashill go, but so would Bilesma and Huda, the whole 9 yards. So, but I don't know. I said before we went on the air, Yzerman's a tough guy to read. Yeah. He really is, and, because he's not one to react emotionally. And when you look at who he hired in Tampa, he brought in his coach. Nobody ever heard of those guys either. Yeah. Nobody ever heard of those guys when he brought them in. Boucher and the other guy. Nobody ever heard of them, and they came from the minor leagues. And the other thing too, Al, there's not a Scotty Bowman out there right now. There's really, I know there's the people want Gerard Gallant and there's a couple other names that have been kind of mentioned a little bit. But these are old retread guys that I don't know are good fits.
Or like a guy like Gallant, I think you bring in if you're at that point where you need that last piece, because the Gallant's kind of the same kind of, I think, the kind of guy who's going to wear out his welcome in 5 years. So you need to win and win right away with him. So, and the Wings are nowhere near that point. And I think by the time the Wings were good, people would be up to here with Gerard Gallant. So, so you're right. There's no real slam dunk hire out there right now. There really isn't. So
no, so hey, if they announce it tomorrow that Blashill re-upped, would I be shocked? No.
Yeah. Would you be happy? No. But you understand the reasoning behind it.
Would the fans have a fit? Absolutely.
Oh, of course they would. But if fans have a fit, if they switch lines up too. So.
Well, again, you're not in a situation where you're trying to get 18,000 fans, like I said, in the seats every night. Mm-hmm. So right. Now we may be at that point next season, of course, 21-22.
Hopefully, fingers crossed.
Right. But this town is going to. The Red Wings fan base is solid. I don't think they're going to bleed fans if they brought Blashill back. There'll be a lot of unhappy people who will just say, because of the aforementioned Blashill fatigue, which I totally understand, totally get it. But I can also see why Yzerman would choose to continue. But it's unusual, Al. I'll just say this. It's unusual in pro sports, and you know this as well as anybody, for a guy to be a coach of a losing team for this long. I don't care what the situation is in terms of a rebuild or not. When Blashill came here in 15. Now this is 6 years later, and he's still the coach, and they haven't done anything. Yeah, and that's just unusual. Now I know Barry Trotz was the first coach of the Nashville Predators hired. He coached there for a million years, but that's different. That's a completely
different. Yeah, exactly.
But it's just unusual to have a guy to be there this long. Well, first of all, it's unusual for a rebuild to take this long, but it's unusual for a guy to be there that long, and so he's kind of defied the odds. I think you put it perfectly when you said that Blashill is not operating under any sort of, he's not negotiating under any sort of a position of strength whatsoever. He'll take whatever job he can get. I can tell you this: if he does not get rehired by the Red Wings, he's not coaching another NHL team the rest of his life, because he's going to be looked at as an AHL guy, which is fine. He's won
AHL developmental. He can coach like the national teams and things like that, but they don't see him. He's not going to win you Stanley Cup. At least that would be his rep right now.
Guarantee you, as sure as I'm breathing, that Blashill will never coach another NHL.
Yeah. How would a fan base react? Say like Barry Trotz. If he replaced Barry Trotz in what was in the Islanders fans would have a shit fit. You're going from one of the elite coaches to a guy. Well, they'll just look at the record in Detroit. Circumstances be damned, and they'll say no, this is not going to fly. I think you've nailed it right there. So Blashill is a lifer here until he's no longer a lifer, essentially. Unless, God forbid, he's here 4 years from now, the Wings turn it around, and who knows? But I don't see that happening either.
He'll find another coaching job. It just won't be in the NHL.
Well, like Weisman.
All right, he could find his way. He could become an assistant somewhere.
Yeah. He's not going to be a head guy anytime soon.
Only because of his knowledge of the league, but he's not going to get a head coaching job.
Yeah, exactly. All right, with that, before we get to, I guess we'll talk Tigers, what's question 2 of the birthday game?
Sure. This person, born in 1945, football, first round, third overall pick of the 1967 NFL draft, ended up in one of his many coaching stints at the college and pro level, ended up coaching his alma mater. I will give you that clue. His alma mater was down south, I will tell you that. I will also tell you that he was a long-time backup quarterback.
Okay. Let me think here. God damn it. Steve Spurrier?
Yes. Very good.
The old ball coach, as he liked to call himself.
Yes. Very good. Excellent.
And a former Heisman winner, if I remember correctly.
Yeah. He was drafted to ostensibly be John Brody's replacement. Yeah. At San Francisco, and Brody ended up playing, I think, a lot longer than the 49ers thought he would, and Spurrier never could crack the lineup. Ended up eventually becoming one of the many quarterbacks that the Buccaneers had their first couple of years of existence. But Spurrier he would start here and there when Brody was hurt, but never was able to rest.
Essentially, he was a journeyman. He was a journeyman in the NFL, a career backup.
And then became a football coach all over the place, college and pro.
I think obviously there was Florida where he made his name, and then remember he went to Washington and absolutely fell on his face because he was the type of guy. Spurrier, because NFL coaches, if you're not working 100 hours a week, you're not working enough. And Spurrier was the type who would rather work 9 to 5 than go golfing. Because in college you can do that because you can. Yeah. You know, he was the face of the program type. He was not really an X's and O's kind of guy. He was a big picture, face of the program. If I got good coordinators and coaches, we're going to win a lot of games. And he was a great quote. And in college, you can get away with that. You can't get away with that in the NFL. And he was a great big picture, big program college coach. Because then he had some success at South Carolina as well.
Yeah.
But in the NFL, he was a complete flop as a head coach, much like Nick Saban or Lou Holtz, or you know, he can continue on. So. But what was my prize again?
The Hamilton Beach Joe Namath popcorn popper.
I don't know. I'll have to. I may have to get rid of a crock pot or two to make room for it. But I have to get rid of my Joe Namath branded crock pot. And all right, with that, let's move on to the Tigers. The last time we talked about the Tigers, Greg, was on the last show, and we were intrigued. They were hovering around 500. Akil Baddoo was essentially channeling his inner Babe Ruth, Lou Gehrig, and Ty Cobb all in one. And since that time, they've gone on a 10-game road trip, and it was like literally a roller coaster where they were swept in Cleveland, then they did the sweeping themselves in Houston, and then they got swept in Oakland. And so the trip turned into a 6-10. Was it 3-10? There was a 3-10. 3-7 road trip. They are 6-10 overall now. They looked awful in Oakland, Greg. They couldn't hit. They couldn't. Well, the bullpen couldn't bullpen. Starting pitching was up and down. Defense was brutal. They were in last place in the Central, and now we're about 3 weeks into the season. Some trends are starting to show up here. It looks like they got decent starting pitching, and that I think we could have saw that coming into the season. The bullpen is absolutely brutal. They are 32nd in team ERA. They were last. They are 31st in fielding independent pitching, and they are 27th in WHIP. The defense has been awful. They've had defense that's cost them a couple games between Victor Reyes' adventures in center field in Oakland, and then there was let me look at his. I got his name here. Mazzara. Mazzara played right field and made two of the worst throws you'll ever see from a right fielder on back-to-back plays. That essentially put a game out of control for the Tigers. And the offense has been weaker than a pea shooter. They're 25th in runs, 29th in on-base percentage, 27th in OPS. So, and they've hit some home runs, but they've almost all been solo. They have essentially one or two guys that are getting on base, and then everybody else is struggling. They got Mazzara's on the injured list, Cabrera's on the injured list. The lack of depth in the organization is already starting to rear its ugly head. I mean, it was that first week or so at home was fun. We're starting to see the real Tigers right now. There's a lot of intriguing pieces here with the, like with Willie Castro and Skubal and Mize and Baddoo and some of these other players. But we're also seeing that the Tigers have been cheaping out on free agents and that on guys like Mazzara, and then you essentially are getting what you pay for of these guys, and that you get very inconsistent. There was a reason these guys the Tigers have picked up were low-end free agents and were seated on the field when they're being asked to do things, and they really can't perform up to that. And I'm still not sold on A.J. Hinch's love of versatility either. I'm still not buying into that. But that road trip, Greg, it was really weird. There was like 7 god-awful games and 3 games where they looked like world beaters. But then again, that's baseball in a nutshell, because you'll see weeks like that where teams will look like they can beat anybody in baseball, and then they'll have another few weeks where they look like they can't get out of their own way. We just got it all condensed into one West Coast road trip.
Well, I wrote a column about this yesterday on my Out of Bounds blog. That basically, I looked at that 10-game road trip as a microcosm of what the Tigers are. They're awful in Cleveland, great in Houston, awful in Oakland. Mm-hmm. Most of the reason why they were awful, when they were awful, was they hit poorly. Which Jim Leland always used to say that when you don't hit, you look lethargic, you look bad. They played great defense in Houston and pitched really well for the most part. Houston, and this is another thing that Jim Leland used to say, was it doesn't matter sometimes who you play, but when you play them. Yep. Houston was in the middle of a bad stretch of baseball themselves, but it doesn't take away from the fact that the Tigers played very well against the Astros. Yeah. They hit the ball. They got good starting pitching, like you said. And
obviously, Badu was still in his honeymoon phase at that point as well.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And then in Oakland, they didn't hit. I mean, that's all there was to it. They had the bad defense. They reared its head on ugly.
And we had Joe Jimenez make his appearance as well.
Yeah, that's
what we'll talk about.
God. Oh my God. So I mean, the bullpen has definitely had its issues, but the offense is just and we should be surprised by this. You look at the lineup; it's not exactly murderer's row. So I don't know why we're surprised that the offense isn't any good. I mean, they don't have any. They're not great. They don't have a lot of great offensive players, so it makes sense that they would be very good. Yeah. So we're still away from Riley Green and Torkelson. And
we're at least a year, at least, probably longer.
Yeah, so they just don't have a lot of big sticks. And Cabrera, before he got hurt, wasn't doing anything anyway.
It was 3 for 24, I believe. So
this is what it is. This is what it's going to be. It's going to be winning a lot of 3-2 games and losing a lot of 8-2 games. Yeah, and that's just the way it's going to be. I mean, they'll win 65 games, which is whatever. But I still think, and like I said in the column, that this winning, however many wins they get this year, be damned. I still think that this team has a chance in 2022 to make some noise. I wouldn't be surprised if they went from like 65 wins to 84 wins. Yeah. I really wouldn't. I truly wouldn't. I'm not drinking any sort of Kool-Aid here. I just think that the way things are lining up with some of the players they've got coming through the pipeline, that they have that potential to make that leap. Yeah. I still believe that they're at the end of more toward the end of the rebuild than they are the beginning, which is a good thing, of course. But this is just what you're seeing now is just what it is. It is what it is. Yeah. But the Tigers they still the best manager that they could have gotten. They still the best coaching staff they could have gotten. They're in good hands. It's not going to be a lot of fun this year with the win-losses. But I really believe that you mentioned some intriguing pieces. There are definitely some intriguing pieces, but do be damned. There are still some intriguing pieces that make this team much more interesting to watch than any of the last 3 we've seen. Right. So it's just going to be a struggle. They're going to make a lot of pitchers look like Cy Young this year. You just have to accept that. Even though I still think they're showing more patience at the plate, which is good. But they're still not really good hitters, though. Yeah. You can show all the patience you want, but ultimately, when you swing them, when the ball gets put in play, you gotta, they're not there yet. They're just not there yet, Al. Yeah. There's still I know fans don't want to hear this. They're sick of hearing this about every team in Detroit, but they're just not there yet. But they're on the right. But they're on the right track. There's definitely light at the end of the tunnel, which is not what you could say about every other team in town. Yeah,
yeah, and I guess we need to remind people, that rebuilds are not linear. They don't go. You don't start at the bottom and go straight up. Right. There's going to be there are going to be peaks and valleys. Some players you're hoping that will take you to the next level won't, and you may have some surprises that will. Some stuff may come out of nowhere in both directions. But remember the '84 team. They kind of plateaued for a few years before they took off again. They were this team that hovered. They kind of made a run in '81, then they kind of hovered around 500-ish for a couple years, and then '84 hit and they took off like a rocket ship. So, that's. They may, like I said, they may look better in a year or two, but it's not going to be a linear straight. It's not going to be a straight up thing. It's not going to look like the stock market zooming up to 500 points. It's going to get ugly. There are going to be times where it's going to be ugly, like right now. Speaking of Badoo, as much fun as those first 2 weeks were, Greg, the wheels kind of come off, and we were expecting this. It was not going to keep up. But the numbers were ridiculous there for a while. 9 games in, he was had a 1.3420 OPS. He was slugging .963 and hitting .370. 4 home runs, 11 RBI, and then came the West Coast in Oakland, 0 for 11 with 8 strikeouts. Oh, and he looks, and this is where people thought, okay, now we'll see what he's kind of made of, because I think people forgot for a while there. This is a kid who never played above A ball. And asking a player to make a leap from A ball to the big leagues, especially because he hadn't played in 2 years, essentially, because between an injury and a pandemic, the fall was going to come. It's just a matter how it levels off at this point. He's able to recover a little bit. And considering the Tigers roster, they're going to give him a long, long, long leash, because you do see the talent. But the K rate is concerning, 40%. That's crazy, crazy high. You're not going to stay in the big leagues with a 40% K rate. But the splits explain quite a bit. Right-handed pitching, he has an OPS of 1.136. Left-handed pitching, he's got an OPS of 0.00. He can't hit left-hand pitching right now. And when he saw that in Oakland, it's just like he suddenly realized, oh, I'm in the big leagues now, and I'm not supposed to hit like this. And he looked completely lost in Oakland. But then again, when you're striking out that much, you are lost, and now it's up to the Tigers to kind of simmer things down, get him level-headed, keep his confidence up, but also, now the learning process begins is that, when you're in the big leagues, you got to constantly make adjustments because the league is always adjusting to you, and that's now the lesson Badoo is going to be learning, and it's up to the Tigers to make sure those lessons take.
This is I don't know what's going to become of Badoo. I really don't, but this is. He's not going to be. I hate to say it. He's not going to be part of the puzzle here. I really don't think so. I think that this Badoo thing was great theater for a couple of weeks.
Yeah,
and he might be a serviceable 4th outfielder down the line. But we need it. This is the team that's going to be the Riley Greens and the Spencer Torkelsons and guys like that. Even Jeimer Candelario, I see sticking around through this.
Yeah, Candelario is one of the few guys in this team who can actually take a damn walk.
Yeah, I mean, but it doesn't mean that Badoo can't get better against lefties. It doesn't mean that he's going to be a totally a Quentin Berry type guy. I'm not saying that, but there's a reason why guys are available in Rule 5.
Right.
Now, sometimes you can get lucky and you can find a diamond in the rough. Yes, that's true. But there's also a reason that another team in your own division, no less, the Twins, would make a guy like that available. Now, sometimes guys are available in Rule 5 because they get caught in a numbers crunch and there's just no room for them on a 40-man roster. But why?
Yeah.
Why isn't there room? Minnesota Twins aren't the Yankees. I mean, they're not that perennial World Series contenders. So there's got to be some reason why a guy like that, was made available by a team like that. But, hey, I wish the kid I'm not down on the guy. I mean, he came crashing down in Oakland, but so did everybody else. I mean, nobody hit in Oakland. I'm not going to, whatever, it happened. You're going to go through those stretches. What's going to keep him at the big league level is how he responds to that. When you go 0 for 11 with 8 Ks, that can do something to your head.
Oh,
and
God, it could destroy you. My God.
Right. So it's up to the coaches, Scott Kubal, who's the head coach and so forth, to keep this kid's head on straight. Because so much of it goes on between the ears. And his talent, whatever talent he has, will, eventually he'll sink or swim based on that. Yeah. But when he goes 0 for 11 with 8 Ks, this is where the rubber meets the road. Okay, now how is he going to respond to this? Is he going to just completely go in the tank, or is he going to have a bounce back series? Maybe he'll bounce back against the Pirates and not get a few hits and feel better about himself. I don't know. We don't know yet. But that kind of real, like, sinking like a lead balloon kind of a deal, can really mess with you. But I think that the thing that Hinch keeps saying about him is that he likes the way his head is screwed on straight. He says, I like the way, he seems to be more mature beyond his years. Well, those are all nice things to say when when there's not been any bad times to really overcome.
Right.
Now you're in a situation where, he really was overmatched in Oakland. So now you got to say, okay, this big head or this good head, this maturity that we keep talking about, is it really there, or was it there because he was enjoying himself? And it's easy to handle the good times is what I'm saying. Now, how do you handle the bad times? And that's where he will find out about him. But this isn't about him. This whole rebuild is not about him. Obviously, no. He's just a footnote to what this season is. But he's not. I hate to say this, but I can guarantee you he won't be around when the team wins baseball games.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it all plays out. But I would not be surprised if we don't see him play for a bit. Yeah. Just to have now sit and watch.
Right.
And maybe they'll start using them like they did Reyes, where they'll ease him back in, and he'll play a couple times a week, pinch hitter, pinch run, defensive replacement, and then as the seasons go on, maybe they'll ease him back in. And Reyes paid off in that they found themselves a serviceable at least fourth outfielder. And honestly, if you get another Victor Reyes out of Baddoo, you've actually had a pretty successful Rule 5 pickup, to be honest with you, because the vast majority of them don't even do what Baddoo did for 2 weeks. So, it was fun while it lasted. Now we can all get real about what's really going to happen with him. And as we mentioned earlier, we do have to talk about the once considered who was once considered the closer of the future, now looking like a reclamation project of the present, and that reclamation will probably happen in Toledo, even though nothing's happened as of yet, and that is one Joe Jimenez. Essentially, his struggles represent the bullpen's struggles as a whole. He was brought up from the taxi squad, I believe, when Julio Teheran went on the 60-day IL with a shoulder issue. There's another one of those. Every year, Al Avila signs a pitcher in free agency on the cheap. And then every winter he does that, every spring that pitcher gets hurt. And it's now Teheran. But Jimenez got called up. Made 2 appearances in Oakland. In 1 inning pitch over 2 games, Jimenez walked 4 of the 10 batters he faced, was charged with 5 runs, didn't get out of any inning. I think he's only... I think one appearance was he ended up with just being 1/3 of an inning, got 1 out, and the next one he got 2 outs, got 2/3 of an inning. Neither one of them, both of them, he had to be replaced. He was loading. He was walking batter. He was walking the bases loaded and walking batters in. He might have got squeezed a couple of times, but for the most part, he just was guessing where the ball was going to go, and. It was actually kind of sad to watch because this is a guy who actually made the All-Star team in 2018. Right. Even though being a Tiger All-Star 2018 means you're probably not great, but you're okay. He was a Rob Fick type pick, but but at least he was showing signs of being a pretty darn good big league pitcher. And over the last 2 years, the wheels have completely come off. He was bad last year, and now he's worse this year. He looks completely broken, Greg. It's getting to the point where how many more chances at the Tigers he's going to get, because he's never really he put together a half a year in 2018, and that's really all he's done with the Tigers in a positive way, and he's been struggling pretty much ever since. And you got to wonder, when do you finally say enough's enough? When do you cut ties? When do you say, we can't fix them, it's time for someone else to give it a try? And I'm thinking about reach that point with Jimenez, because he looks absolutely and completely lost out there right now. And maybe he's the kind of guy, maybe a change of scenery would work, but you're not going to get anything for him. He'd probably have to be DFA'd to go to Toledo, so it's just a mess what's going on with the bullpen in general, and specifically with Jimenez.
Yeah, there's nothing worse than watching a guy not be able to throw a strike. It's just, it's really, if it's
not a fastball, it's not finding a strike zone.
there's so many mechanics about pitching and so many different, guys that have just completely lost it so quickly. It's really, and you wonder, obviously a lot of it's mental. It has to be, the whole Steve Blass syndrome and Kevin Soche and
Rick Ankiel.
And Keel and a number of other guys. It just leaves them for whatever reason, and they just can't get it back. And I agree with you. I think Jimenez is probably done, maybe done entirely. I don't know. And there's no room on any roster for a guy who can't throw strikes. So if he can't throw strikes, I don't care where his scenery is, he's going to be out of the game forthwith. It's sad, but it's a bottom line business. If you can't throw strikes, you can't pitch in the big leagues. So we'll see.
Yeah, I guess we should also bring up that Spencer Turnbull is finally is supposed to be back on the roster this week. And he has been out because he had COVID. I believe I saw in the paper today he said he had lost 10 pounds because of COVID. And now they're going back to, because of the, Turnbull is just nowhere near ready to go. Well, to have a game like Boyd did on Sunday where he went 8 innings. They're hoping to get 3 out of Turnbull right now. They're going back to the piggybacking of starts. Turnbull's going to be the opener. And now that Skubal has struggled to start the year, he's got an ERA over 6. And has been extremely inefficient. He's throwing like 80 pitches per 4 innings. He's like a 20-pitch inning guy right now. He's all over the place. So they're going to put Skubal in the bullpen, have Turnbull start, and do the what they did with Fulmer and Norris last year. Essentially, going to do it with Turnbull and Skubal, which makes a lot of sense because Turnbull is going to need time to get. Who knows about it? It could be a month or two before Turnbull is close to full strength, and because who knows how COVID's going to affect you on the long haul. And obviously, it might be best for Skubal to come out of the bullpen for a while. Maybe a little lower pressure for him. So I'm glad to see Turnbull finally come back because I think, even though we're getting teased again by Boyd, Greg, he's looked really good to start the season. But how many times have we seen that from him? I still think Turnbull has the best stuff on this team. And I'm just glad to see him back. And it's looking like starting pitching will be the strength of this team. That strength is obviously relative, but that looks like that's going to be the best position group on the team this year.
Yeah, so far that's what it seems to be. They need to stop kicking the ball around. They need to get the bullpen a little bit more stable.
A little,
yeah,
a lot more stable.
You're right. I mean, they starting pitching seems to be what they can kind of hang their hat on, which is good because if you're going to hang your hat on anything, that's a thing to hang your hat on. But they just don't have the other components. They're still far away. But I think I'm a big Turnbull fan. I really am. I really like the way I like him a lot. It's too bad that he had the COVID situation, but. That's okay. The team wasn't going to win the pennant anyway, but it's good. It's good to see him back, and I like him a lot. I think he's not ever going to be probably a top flight starter, but I can see him being a serviceable, 30 start a year guy.
He gives me Dan Petrie type vibes, if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, Petrie, Terrell.
Petrie, Terrell. That's that guy he'll never be. He'll give you 200. Yeah, he'll give you 30 starts, close to 200 innings, and he will battle. If you know what I'm saying, and he will keep you in games. He's not going to be a 20-game winner unless everything breaks perfectly for him. Right. But he'll go out there, and he'll give you a 3.7 to 4 ERA. Hopefully, maybe win 12 games and. Essentially be a very good middle of the rotation kind of guy. Right. The talent for that is there because they're hoping the top of the rotation guy is going to be Mize and Skubal and Manning and whatever they got. And we got at least mentioned Mize, who had the best start of his career this past week. 7 shutout innings in Houston, struck out 5, only allowed 4 hits. He struggled a little bit against Oakland, but he still had a pretty solid outing. I think he went 5, gave up a couple runs. So. Now, last year, it was Skubal who looked better than Mize. Now Mize is looking better than Skubal. But again, it's so early, and there's such small sample sizes. And But at the very least, for as badly as Mize struggled in spring training, I think the fan base really needed to see this is what Mize is capable of. He's not there yet, but you're getting a glimpse of what we think he can be. He can be a top-of-the-rotation guy who can shut down some of the top teams in the league, and that's what he did against Houston. And
you're also getting a glimpse of what Chris Fedor brings to the team as a pitching coach.
Right.
Fedor, who I love that hire. I love that they went to the college ranks, got a guy who's he's metrics. He's younger. He's
out of the University of Michigan.
Yeah, he's just, and he made you mentioned Mize in Houston. He had Mize said, "Look, I didn't think after the first inning I was going to last.
That's right.
Longer than the third inning.
Yeah,
I couldn't command my fastball." And Fedor saw something, and he said, "Look, you attack in your warm up pitches. Attack." And Mize was like, "Well, okay," and he did, and he had that great outing.
Yeah.
And so those are the kinds of adjustments that I'm not trying to throw shade against Rick Anderson or the previous pitching coaches, but that's the kind of thing that and I don't want to make too much of it either, but that's the kind of a thing that a guy like Fedor brings to Hinch says, this guy lives and breathes pitching. That's all he does.
Yeah.
He just lives and breathes pitching. He's another one who had to sit out the first two series because of COVID precautions. Fedor.
Yeah.
But he's the kind of guy that can see those things and make these adjustments on the fly. Mm-hmm. And I just feel like the Tigers are in good hands, given the kind of staff they've got, which is that blend of young veterans and just flat out rookies and guys
and reclamation projects,
right? And guys that are coming through the system. You mentioned Manning et al. Right. That's where this staff is right now. A guy like Fedor, I think, is a perfect pitching coach, and I think that and these are the guys that AJ Hinch brought in. Why? Because Hinch has got this cash of being. Look at all the success he's had as a big league manager. These guys want to work for Hinch. He got George Lombard, who could have been a manager. He went through a million manager interviews as a bench coach. Scott Kuhlbaugh, who's a highly respected hitting coach, and Chip Hale, another guy who's. These are top flight coaches, and hats off to not only Hinch but to the Tigers for opening up the pocketbook and say, look, hire. Because these guys didn't come cheap. Hire these guys who make probably one of the higher paid coaching staffs, I would think, in baseball. Because these guys are not, they're not rookies to the coaching ranks, except for Fedor in terms of the big leagues. And that's what I'm talking about. That's the kind of thing that a guy like Hinch brings. He brings with it, kind of like Dan Campbell at the Lions, who's going out there and hiring all these assistants that are really making everybody kind of look twice at the Lions.
Right.
Hinch is doing the same thing with the Tigers. He's bringing these guys in who've got collectively tons of experience, lots of winning under their belts, and that's exactly what they need right now. Where this team is in terms of not just the pitching, but overall where they are right now in their development. This is the kind of manager and this is the kind of coaching staff that they need.
Yeah. You are completely right, and I'm very encouraged by the coaching staff, and I think when you have a high-profile staff like they have, especially with A.J. Hinch, this team, I think that they have to have a very eventful offseason next year. I think this has got to be the last year where they essentially – looking to bargain bin for free agents and look for reclamation projects.
Right.
They need to start making a splash this coming offseason, or you're going to have a guy like A.J. Hinch saying, why did I come here? I could probably pick 10 other jobs that would take me and they'd be in better shape. So we'll see what happens, but I completely agree with you, Fedor. All right, before we wrap things up, we got to touch on the Pistons at least a little bit because they're actually playing exciting basketball. They still have the third worst record in the league. But there are teams catching up to them. There are teams that are tanking better than the Pistons because the Pistons put out a tanking lineup last night, Greg. Didn't have a player in the lineup, I think, that that was over in 24. And they beat the Cavaliers, who were playing had veterans in the lineup. And they obviously they got a big lead, blew it, got their stuff together, came back and got a victory out of it. And people are like, oh, my God, what about the tank? Oh, what's going to cost us in the draft? But I am not going to get upset about a win when you're in tanking mode when your 3 first-round draft picks are absolutely out there kicking ass. I mean, last night, Killian Hayes, who was looked like a completely different ball player coming back from his injury, he was able to sit on the bench for 2.5, 3 months and say, that's the NBA game, now I need to know what they have to do. Because he looks like a completely different player. He's much more aggressive now. He's making highlight reel passes. Since he's come back, he's averaging 7 points and 5 assists a game. He's starting. Saddiq Bey is literally entrenched in the starting lineup. He was the 19th pick. He is shooting 38% from 3. Is averaging 11.4 points per game. He's in his 126 3 balls are second most ever by a rookie through 54 games, behind Luka Doncic. And Luka Doncic, great player. I mean, Bey has been. People knew he could shoot, but he's looking more like he's a nice all-around player. And then you got Isaiah Stewart, who looks like a kind of a combination of Ben Wallace and Dennis Rodman, kind of just not in talent per se, but in the way he plays. He's become entrenched in the rotation. He was a 16th pick overall. This was the player, Greg, that people said, it's a reach taking him at 16. You don't take centers that high in the league, especially ones that kind of undersized. And the guy is now entrenched in the starting rotation. He's become a fan favorite. He's got the nickname Beef Stew now. He actually was on America's Test Kitchen making beef stew this week. And over the past, he's playing. He got starters minutes over the last 4 games because of rest and injuries. He's averaging 15.5 points per game, 14 rebounds per game. He had 21 against Oklahoma City, and he's shooting 69% from the field, and he's actually showing he can shoot the 3. So this 2020 draft has been an out-and-out home run. After a decade and a half of misses in the draft, all of a sudden to see the Pistons come up with 3, and maybe even 4 if you throw Saban Lee in there, who was a second-round draft pick and is playing quite a bit right now as a backup. I'm actually flabbergasted about how well Troy Weaver's first draft has gone, and it's made for I hate to say tanking the right way, but they are. They are competitive. They're still losing, but they're competitive. And they're not losing because they're not playing anybody. They're losing because they have talented young players who still need to figure out the NBA game, and it shows at the end of games. So, I find this Piston team fascinating. I'm having the most fun watching the Pistons. So I'd have to go back to the 2007, 2008, to the end of the going to work era, to be so entertained by a Piston team. Even though they're losing a lot, they are a fun team to watch. And you can lose if you're fun. And this team is fun.
I think that Dwayne Casey is having fun. Now, I know Dwayne Casey is – every coach would like to coach a championship contender, and who wouldn't, and he has. But I think he's at the stage of his career where that may not be as important to him as it once was. I think he's really enjoying the energy these young kids bring. He loves this Tyler Cook.
Yeah, that's another young guy.
Couldn't say enough about Tyler Cook. Stumbling all over himself, praising Tyler Cook, and
he was brought in on a 10-day contract, and they gave him a full NBA contract after 2 10-day contracts.
I love it. I love. He just went on and on about this kid, and some of the other young guys too. Casey, I think, is enjoying this season as well. I mean, of course they're not winning, but I think Casey sees that there is definitely pieces that he can mold. Now, there's still a top draft, lottery pick away, obviously.
They're missing that superstar. That's what they really need.
Right. But you mentioned that maybe it was before we went on the air about certain players that are not, you don't build around, but it could be a component,
right?
Or maybe I can't remember what we were talking about.
Well, they're not foundation pieces, but they're pieces that you need to plug the whole. Essentially, they're bricks, not foundation. If you want, I guess you go that way.
Exactly, and you need those guys. It's great. You got to have the superstars, of course.
Yeah,
but even you still have to have those guys surrounding the superstars that are going to be those guys that you can count on.
Right.
And so that's what they're trying to figure out right now. And I've said this before. The Pistons are trying to figure out, okay, who do we have? Who do we want to keep around for the next? Who's going to be part of this? And right now, I think that Casey, who I mentioned Hinch being the perfect coach, perfect manager for the Tigers. Casey's the perfect coach for the Pistons, as far as I'm concerned. This is right up his alley. He loves this stuff. He's the kind of guy that likes to get in the slop and mold young players and develop them, and he loves it.
Yeah.
And I mean, would he like to have a LeBron James type or a Steph Curry? Of course, who wouldn't? But he doesn't have that. So the next best thing to him are these young, hungry dudes that are going out there and busting their butt for 15, 20 minutes a night, or however many minutes he gives them on the floor. And everybody leaves it on the floor. There's no Jim Leland used to say, no passengers here. I don't see a lot of passengers on this team. And why? Because they're all want to be part of the NBA and part of this whole Pistons thing, and they've got a lot to play for. I don't mean in terms of wins and losses. They got a lot to play for in terms of their NBA career. And this is something that can only benefit them. You know, we were talking earlier about the Tigers being that team in the 80s that kind of gradually got better. The Pistons were the same way. They kind of had to weed out. You know, I said in my column about about a rebuild. You have to weed and feed a rebuild. You have to weed out the bad, feed the good, and that's what the Pistons did. They built around Tripucka and Isaiah at first, added Lampier, added Vinny, but had a lot of guys, Al, that were never going to be part of it. They were just one and done guys that just came in and came out. You knew that they weren't going to be part of the whole thing. And then they started, got rid of people, added people, got rid of people. And until they finally had this nucleus, and then they drafted Sally and Rodman, and all of a sudden now they became this powerhouse. Yeah. And that's what the Pistons are trying to do right now. They're trying to figure out who's going to be those 4 or 5 guys that are going to be the satellites around this yet to be determined.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to put it. Yeah,
and once they figure that out, then you do what every other team does. You bring people in, take them out, whatever. But they're trying to figure out who the satellites are around this yet to be determined superstar who they don't have yet. Granted, but I mean, so I agree with you. They're not. You know, it's not about the win-loss record with them either, but they don't go out there and play and gets blown out very often like the Red Wings do.
Yeah. I mean, I just flashed back to that pass that Killian Hayes made earlier this week on a fast break, 3/4 court, bounce pass with English, and he literally curved it like a bowling ball. And he hits Sadiq Bey in stride for a layup. And you go, oh my God, that's no. And I think it was against Oklahoma City, and I think they lost that. No, they did win that game, but it's the story. You see these flashes from these players, or you see Isaiah Stewart elbow Blake Griffin in the back of the head because he pissed him off. You know, and Griffin's welcome back to Detroit pity party. And Stewart was having none of it, and he ended up getting ejected because he's not taking and he's not taking any shit from anybody. And yes, the other thing to remember, Isaiah Stewart and Hayes are only 19 years old, and Bay I think is 20. I think he's 21. I mean, these especially Stewart and Hayes are babies. And then you look at Stewart, who's it looks like he's 30 the way his body is, and he's still not done growing.
Right.
I'm just having a lot of fun watching the Pistons, and I think it looks like they finally have figured out, or maybe Tom Gores has gotten out of the way finally and realized I got to build a playoff team the right way, can't take any shortcuts. It just took him a decade to figure that out, kind of like Mike Ilitch, where the Tigers sucked under his first 10 years of ownership.
Have you noticed that the less you hear
from an owner?
Tom Gores,
the better they are.
Have you noticed that the less you hear about Tom Gores, the better the Pistons situations become?
Exactly. That's a nice point.
I'm not sure if that's on purpose or not, but all I know is that when the louder Gores was, the more in the mix he was, the worse things seemed to be. Now you barely hear from the guy, which is fine, and it's all about Casey and all about Weaver and all about the
kids,
the players. You know, I remember when Isaiah Thomas first got here, and he early on in training camp in his rookie year, guys like Terry Tyler and John Long, who had been around for a while during the losing years, said, this kid passes like I've never seen anybody pass before. I don't know if we've got guys who are ready for his passes, who can accept his passes, because you've got to be ready for these passes. We haven't had anybody on the team who's ever passed like this before. Mm-hmm. And so when you got a guy like Killian Hayes make the pass that he did to Bay, you always got to be ready, because it's like Maravich. You could be he could be 30 feet behind you and you throw you a pass, and it looks silly if you're not ready for it.
Exactly.
So I think that that's what obviously what Hayes brings is, and that's what Casey likes about him, is he's got this vision. He says he sees the court well. I know it's coach speak, but it's true. He sees the court well, and these great playmakers do have eyes in the back of their head. It's amazing that some of the passes they make and some of the things they do. And somebody is going to benefit a lot from these passes. I'm not sure who it is yet, but somebody's going to get a lot of points from Killian Hayes' assists.
Yeah. All right. With that, we need to start wrapping things up, because I know we're probably already past and we got to get Greg out of here. So, Greg, who or what is your jerk of the week?
My jerk of the week, Al, are the Miami Marlins, but not for the reason you may think, because they've been so bad lately. But one of their former president, I can't remember his first name, his last name is Sampson, came out with a blistering rebuke of Barry Bonds' era, if you want to even call it that, as hitting coach for the Marlins. And what a lousy hire that was. He didn't want to make it. Sampson didn't want to make it. Jeff Loria, the owner, overruled, wanted to bring Bonds in. And it was just nothing but a diva who didn't want to really put in the work, who fell asleep in the clubhouse, who had all these demands about when they went on the road, what kind of hotel suite he wanted to have. And he didn't want to work. He didn't really help the team. Sampson said he brought zero to the job. Made a couple of friends. Stanton, he liked Stanton. Stanton liked him. But other than that, there was nothing that Barry Bonds brought to the party when it comes to being a hitting coach. And he just basically stole money in the short time that he was the hitting coach. And I remember when they made that move, I thought, what the hell are they doing? Everybody knew that this was going to be a disaster except for Jeff Loria. And nobody liked having Bonds there. So my jerk of the week is, I guess it's Loria for making the decision. Not that it really mattered who the hitting coach was of the Marlins at that time, because they were so bad, but that they would bring a guy like that in, knowing it wasn't like he was an unknown. It wasn't like Barry Bonds just fell out of the pickup truck. People knew who this guy was, and they still brought him in, and he was no better a hitting coach than he was a teammate. So my jerk of the week is the Miami Marlins, specifically Jeff Loria, for having that stain on an already stained franchise. Yeah, that's a train wreck franchise. It really is. And it's hard to believe that a team in South Florida, which should be a baseball hotbed, is such a train wreck of a franchise. So I'm completely with you there. My jerk of the week, I wasn't sure where I was going to go at first, because I was thinking about what's going on in Europe with the Super League, which was essentially the Super League was. They were going to take the top 15 soccer clubs throughout Europe, between the Premier League and Serie A and La Liga, and they would always be eligible for the top of the top tournament. And then they'd only allow 5 other teams from all the other leagues combined to play their way into it. It'd be like the top 15 teams in college football, but not by record, but by brand, by fan base, by how much they're worth, would always make the playoffs. Then you'd only allow 5 other teams to be in those. It'd be like Michigan making the playoff every year. Michigan, great. No, they sell a ton of merchandise. They may have the biggest fan base in football. They look cool, but the team sucks. But they would be in the playoffs. That's what the Super League was going to be like. But that looks like it's already falling apart. There are teams already backing out because the backlash has been so violent. So I'm going to stay local with my jerk of the week, and I'm going with local sports talk, which always means 97.1 The Ticket here in Detroit when it comes to talk radio. And when the Mantha trade went down,
I thought, okay, I'm going to turn the radio on. I try to avoid local sports talk as much as possible for the most part because it's been awful. I got badly reminded is how bad sports talk radio could be in this town, especially when it comes if the sport is not football. Because the Mantha trade goes down, and the guys they had on the air at the time, what was it, Rico Beard, who the only thing he knows about is Michigan State football and basketball, and Mike Valenti, who the only thing he really cares about is football. And also, they have to talk about the biggest trade in the NHL, which involved the Detroit Red Wings, and they sounded completely and totally lost because neither one of them gives a shit about hockey. And for that matter, if you tune into the show occasionally, neither one of them seems to give a shit about the Detroit Pistons. They don't give a shit about the Tigers. They just complain about the perpetual rebuilds, and they don't really have any. It's just. But just hearing them flail about trying to talk about the Mantha trade, when you can tell they hadn't watched any Wings hockey in who knows since when, or even paid attention to the Wings. And this station is also the Wings' flagship station on the radio. And to hear them flail about trying to talk about Anthony Mantha when neither one of them has probably watched a Wings game all year, it was hilarious. The fans knew far more about what's going on in the Wings than these two hosts did. And that pretty much goes for a lot of the guys that on that station. If it's football, a lot of them can really talk the game, or at least they have a lot of interest in it. Like in the morning show, they got John Jansen, who played in the NFL, for example. Right. But what does John Jansen know about the Pistons or the Red Wings? He probably knows less than most fans. No, he can give you the athlete perspective, but does he really know what's going on in those teams when his life revolved around football for his entire life? In fact, he was probably a child? No. So my jerk of the week is 97-1 the Ticket, who's really become this one-trick pony. They talk about football 90% of the time. I bet you if you tuned into it right now, there's a Wings game on right now, but if you tuned into it during the day most of the time, they would be talking about a mock NFL draft. Literally, that seems like all they would talk about. So my jerk of the week is local sports talk radio, specifically 97.1 The Ticket, for essentially becoming a football station 365 days a year. They could give a shit about the other three major sports in this town. They'll talk about Michigan football, Michigan State football, and the Lions, and that's it.
Yeah,
that's awful. That's awful. Hearing them trying to talk about Anthony Mantha, it was hilarious. It really was. Yeah. They don't know.
Right. A good point.
All right, let's get the hell out of here, Greg. Why don't you get out the thank yous and where they can find us online?
Well, yeah. I'll let you let folks know where they can find the podcast.
No, you do it.
Me online.
You do it.
I can't do it as good as you can. You can find me online on my Out of Bounds blog, WordPress. Just Google Greg Eno Out of Bounds or just Out of Bounds WordPress and you'll find it. Bookmark it. I'm there every week with something brand new. Want to thank my lovely wife Sharon for putting up for this nonsense every week, and follow me on Twitter at Greg Eno. Follow the Knee Jerks on Twitter at the Knee Jerks, and I want to thank you, Big Al, for making Tuesday night so gosh darn fun.
Yeah, thank you, Greg, for taking time out of your very busy schedule and having to tear yourself away from that cute dog to talk sports. Yes, he is. Bean is adorable. I want to give a shout out to Linda, who was there on our last shift of the week in the ER. And so just wear a mask, because she's sick and tired of you idiots who aren't wearing masks ending up in the goddamn ER. Wear a mask so we can get through this. I get my second vaccine shot tomorrow afternoon. Greg's already gotten his 2 shots. He's in that 2-week window now, waiting to be fully vaccinated, and I will be there shortly. So please, people, behave. Get your act together so we can end this and we can actually have full stadiums again and talk about fun things rather than bitch you out for not wearing a mask and making Linda's life miserable. So, all right, with that, listen to the show. We're on the usual places online when it comes to podcasts: Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Google Play, Amazon Music, Deezer, Radio Public, thekneejerks.net, where you can find it on your computer browser. Go find all the show notes, all the links there, and you can also download the MP3 from that site as well. Essentially, anywhere podcasts are aggregated, just do a search of The Knee Jerks, and you will find me and Greg. With that, let's get the hell out of here, and we can enjoy the rest of our night. Greg, see you in a couple weeks where we'll have the NFL draft to talk about. The draft will have happened by then, and then we can yell about the Lions for the first time in a month. So until then, this is Al Beaton saying good afternoon, or should I say good night. Oh, God, I'll just say aloha and see you in 2 weeks.
Ciao, we'll see you in 2 weeks.